Panharmonicon presents a podcast.
All right.
Oh. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. Testing. Cornelius called Cyclops. No, that doesn't work. Cyclops, even though his name starts with a C, it does not. I'm sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Panharmonicon Presents a podcast.
Oh my.
I am one of your loyal hosts, Damon.
And I am the other half. Hopefully just as loyal, Farron.
And today, for the first time in podcast history, we bring you a movie that has just recently come out.
Yeah.
We bring you a hopefully soon to be instant classic from director Ryan Coogler and starring Michael B. Jordan. The movie today we are going over is Sinners. This is a movie we saw, I guess technically you would call it opening day, but I guess now that they do Thursday night openings, it would be the day after. I think now that they treat Wednesday as preview.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we saw it the Friday it came out, and I don't know about you. I mean, I know about you because we talked about it right after. But for the sake of the podcast, I don't know about you, but it definitely was not what I truly was expecting, and it actually, honest to goodness, blew me away. Anybody who looked at just a single, even the first teaser trailer, knew going into it that it was a vampire flick, but what you get out of it when you leave is something almost wholly different. You have a period piece set in Jim Crow era Mississippi. You have, some would say, a musical. You have the slightest bit of horror. In the vampire plot, you have action. You have a jambalaya, a gumbo of genres.
Yes.
And all form, in my opinion, a cohesive
Genre
and,
jambalaya.
Very, very. I would say like a very cohesive and interesting and captivating plot. A movie that I would just say you definitely need to see. I know there are people out there that have said that it is a bit of a mess, that it feels like it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I think I've heard things like mile wide, inch deep. My opinion doesn't matter. What you see is what you see.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, no. There's a depth there that currently I think you kind of almost can only get out of Ryan Coogler. And everything you see from the movie really gives you a touch that, like, just, that Coogler flavor. If you've seen things like Black Panther, or even, I would say maybe even kind of like I wouldn't really say three movies, maybe Fruitvale Station. To think that this is a dude who I think kind of really just got himself into movies and movie directing. I wouldn't say recently, but much recent than a lot of other of the big name directors. really says a lot about his eye for cinematography, his eye for casting, his eye for writing, and his eye for movie directing. That is enough about what I think, though. What do you think, Farron?
Terrible time. I'm one of those people who thinks it was a mile wide and an inch deep. It was so shallow. I don't know how far I can get without breaking my laugh. How ridiculous that sounds, even trying to get that out.
You got the two sides of it.
And I know it's hard because it's, art is subjective, and not everyone's going to share the same opinion, and that's fine. I do find those comments interesting, calling it a mess. I think there was even... It might have been a review that you sent me where it said that one of the reasons why it fails is that the twin characters, the Michael B. Jordan, Michael B. Jordan and Michael B. Jordan aren't different enough as characters in order for this to work. Which I wholeheartedly disagree. Again, to each their own when it comes to their opinion. Ultimately, feelings and opinions about the movie as a whole, I absolutely loved it. Admittedly, when we walked out of the theater and we were talking about it, I would say maybe 5 minutes of the conversation, I realized I wanted to go back into the theater and see it again.
I still want to see it again.
I still really want to see this film again. And I think that as we go through the analysis of this film in this episode, something that's kind of important to keep in mind is that, we have only seen it once so far. So I think there might be a lot of ideas that we have about motifs or questions and certain theories that we have that we maybe just haven't had the time to fully flesh out yet, because maybe after a second or third watch we'll and as we learn more even outside of that world of Sinners will help us to sort of understand a lot of the threads that Ryan Coogler wove in this film, because trust us, it's a lot. Which is why I'm so confused about the mile wide, inch deep comment. It does make me wonder, if you were to speak to that person, that critic, like what would they consider a film that was a lot deeper? Like what is their barometer for, a movie having a lot of depth or being too shallow?
That's that's a good question. I would like to actually ask that question, because it would give me a greater idea of why they would think something like this was shallow, why it was a mess. I do kind of understand why one can think it is a mess, simply because the main premise, the thing that we all thought was the true premise of it, takes so long to actually occur that you think to yourself, why are you wasting time? But I think ultimately any critic, any person that enjoyed it, both probably need to ask the same exact thing, and that's, what was Ryan Coogler actually going for? Like, we say it's a vampire movie, but is it really a vampire movie? Just because it has vampires in it doesn't make it a vampire movie. Is it just his way of saying this is kind of like an alt history period piece? Is this kind of like an idea plucked from what could have been something in oh my goodness, I had that going and I blanked on it. The TV series, Jonathan Majors has a TV series with Cthulhu.
Oh wow, yeah, the one on
Lovecraft
HBO
Country.
Max. Yes.
Lovecraft Country.
Yeah.
So I think of it more like that than I do think of it as what a lot of people refer to it as is kind of like a redux of Quentin Tarantino's movie
From Dusk Till
Dawn.
Dawn,
Right?
Yeah.
Which I know it gets that comparison a lot, and it makes sense that it gets that comparison a lot, but I guess to me it just didn't feel so much. It feels so much more like a period piece than it does just a movie that somebody inserted vampires into.
Yeah. And that is, I think, maybe one of the interesting things, and something that you made me think about, because when going into a movie, I think typically, especially if you're a consistent moviegoer, you probably have already set an expectation for how a story will manifest, right? And the thing about this story, and for what it was advertised as in the trailers, which, you know, ultimately is only 2.5 minutes out of a 2 hour and 17-minute movie, so how much can you really show? But to your point about it does kind of feel like the vampires in that aspect of the film, it happens so late in the film, like so much has already happened that you almost kind of forget. I think you even brought it before, that you almost kind of forget that there was a horror aspect to this film, that there were going to be vampires, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. But I think that's something that, you know, as we dig deeper into this film in this episode today, that I would like to talk about is, why do we set those expectations? You know, why is it that a director can't experiment with the form of a film without getting so much backlash and it just being immediately considered, oh, this is just a mess? Like, is it a mess, or are you just not used to digesting a film that is formatted this way, that tells a story in this sort of sequence?
Honestly, part of me thinks it might just be the marketing for the movie. Before we get further into this movie, I do want to say that this is a spoiler warning right now. If I had like a sound effect, it would start playing like a siren, letting you know that from here on forth we will be spoiling this movie.
And if there was anything we spoiled actually before,
I don't think we spoiled too much. The only thing we really maybe spoiled was like how late the vampires are in the movie. We didn't really spoil too much. But this is your 100%. If you have not seen Sinners, and I very much so encourage you to go watch the movie.
Yeah.
But if you still want to hear what we got to say about the movie, even though you have not seen the movie, I'm telling you now, spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of spoilers.
Lots
We're going
of
to talk about
spoilers.
this movie up and down.
And I think we should also go, I think we should also go ahead and throw out there that even with this review, still go see it. Still go see it. Listening to the review, while we appreciate so much your time and your listening to us talk about movies, but also go watch it.
Yeah, definitely.
It is something that needs to be experienced.
Yeah, I would say stop it now. Go watch the movie. When you have something, like you watch that movie and you're like, man, I got some thoughts. Come back.
Yeah, grab
Put your thoughts in the comments.
Yes.
Listen to what we got to say. Tell us, man, Damon, you were wrong is all get out.
Yeah.
Shut up. Tell us, Farron, I liked your points. They're pretty salient. But here's what I thought.
Tell us, hey, I went to Kroger or whatever my nearest grocery store was, and I got these snacks, and I went to the theater with these snacks, and I'm listening right now to your podcast with these snacks, because we can also talk about that if you want. Because might be why if you don't think that Dame's opinions worked, that might be why you think that, because you just did not have the right snack in your system to really kind of understand the genius that this man is putting out there. So,
I mean, that could be it. You know, I mean, you're not you when you're hungry.
No.
And maybe
those
your
outlaw chips
opinions
that you were just
change.
talking about, I can see that making somebody kind of sour.
I don't know. Maybe, you know what? My taste may be different. People may like those outlaw snacks. Who knows? I'm not, you know what? I'm not going to say anything bad about you guys, because who knows if Outlaw Snacks eventually wants to, you know, maybe give your boys a little bit of cash to tell them about them Outlaw Snacks.
Yeah,
but
admittedly,
that's
I
all
haven't
you
had
get
them
right
yet,
now, because we're not promoting them. So
yeah, we're not reporting. We're actually not promoting anyone.
But if you'd like us to, let us know,
please.
So yeah, spoilers. Back to what I was saying. The movie was marketed in a way that I think betrayed the movie itself. Mm-hmm. From the first get-go, you do know that it is a vampire movie, but the vampires, like I was saying earlier, show up very late. If we were to set the movie within like 4 blocks, it is block number 4 where anything vampire action related actually happens. I recall very much of seeing at one point the marketing called it the Avengers,
What?
of vampire movies.
What?
Yeah. They equated it to the Avengers, and I'm like, why would you do that?
How did you do that? Like, how did that person's mind?
Probably because they were like Ryan Coogler, especially if I'm Warner Brothers. They're like Ryan Coogler, Black Panther, Marvel, Avengers. So let's Michael B. Jordan. Like, let's equate this to the Avengers. That way, people who only go out to see summer blockbusters will come out to see this because the movie is amazing, but it isn't a summer blockbuster.
I guess when you think about it, as we get into the characters, it's kind of like when you think you one of those characters, you could probably consider them the Human Torch.
I mean, you definitely consider somebody the Human Torch. I would honestly say that, like, if I were to break it down into, like, in a wanting to try to make it like the Avengers, I guess you could say, like, yeah, Smoke's Captain America and Stacks Iron Man. Like, the movie just is its own thing.
Yeah.
Compared to that, just because you want people who are, like, really just not normal moviegoers to come see this movie is I think it did both sides a disservice. People who came in there like, man, I'm expecting the Avengers, and you're telling me I get Roots. And then the other, like, and then on the movie side, they're like, no, I just really wanted to give you a thoughtful art piece exploring the history of black music and throw a little vampire twist into it. And now I got to get compared to a movie I'm not trying to be.
Right, a movie you're not trying to emulate.
So I think that did a disservice, but even if I'm a critic, I'm not going to be looking at that. I'm still going to be looking at it as what it is. Because if I've never seen the, like, I got to give myself the old movies I've actually seen so I can make this comparison work. If I've never seen...
Have you ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if I've never seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then it's going to come back out in movie theaters, and someone marketing tells me it's the Doctor Strange of space movies, and I'm going to be like, what? I'll go see it, I'm like, this is nothing like Doctor Strange.
Stanley Kubrick.
But yeah, I really
That's
think
interesting.
And
you know what? It's interesting that it would be marketed that way. That in advertisements they would use that, because that kind of ties back into what we were just talking about with expectations in the form of films, right? And how big Marvel has been. I mean, we've had this conversation before about how watching those films, and this is not to dog on MCU at all. Like, trust us, we love that shit. Since Tony Stark said he was Iron Man, but it's more so that I think we've all become kind of used to a very specific form in films, and then to see something that doesn't match that form, I think for some folks can be jarring, especially when you're not allowing yourself to take the film for what it is, for being its own thing. Like Dame said, like, if you're going into that movie like, oh shit, yeah, I'm about to watch a 1932 Avengers movie, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be
very disappointed. I can't even imagine. I can imagine the marketing people being like, "Yep, that makes sense. That's what we're going to go for is the Avengers."
Yeah.
Like, the Avengers at this point isn't even going to go see an Avengers movie. It was just so dumb on their end. But if it gets people into seats to go watch that movie, I guess it did its job.
Yeah.
We have more. So we know it did what, 60 million? And it's
yes.
3 days.
60 million, I believe. Let me look at this real quick. Yeah. So it's opening weekend box office 61 million globally.
61 million globally, right?
Yeah.
So I know that's been another point of contention with people trying to kind of state that it really needs to make more in order to for Warner Brothers to get their money back. And so, I mean, I don't think it'll have a problem doing that. Granted, the big problem is, I mean, it was like a $90 to $100 million movie to make, and then they themselves usually double that when it comes to marketing, global marketing. So you're probably looking at about 180 to close to 200 million. To be able to already make a chunk of that back just in your
opening weekend
is, in my opinion, not bad. Like you can't equate it to a Marvel movie. I mean, we just said that, right? But like in this case, you can't equate it to a Marvel movie. It can't be $100 million movie. Like Marvel movies at this point aren't even $100 million weekend openers.
Yeah.
So.
Damn, dude, do you remember those days though when it'd be like, oh, this movie opened at 200 million?
Yeah, I mean, you're just like
insane.
And I think, and that's the biggest problem I think that movie companies have, that game companies have, are both that they are sitting there they're looking at numbers from 7-8 years ago and thinking, why are we doing that anymore? And they don't understand that this isn't 1992 or 1987. This isn't 1965. Your trends are over lickety split at this point. Yeah. What could be a hot thing in January can be ice cold by the end of January, and we're on to something new.
Right.
And we're not in a world anymore where people are flocking to see every single big movie that they think comes out between April and like August.
Yeah. Also, like to your point earlier, it also has changed in how long a movie stays out. Mm-hmm. You know, when we talk about like, oh, Titanic is one of the greatest, the highest grossing films of all time. And granted, yeah, I mean, like it's even still adjusting for inflation, that's still the case. But you know, being in theaters for like a year, I mean, some of those movies would be in theaters for like
forever.
9 months, dude. You could baby can. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, they would have like
insane.
their like crazy lifespan of just being in a theater forever.
Yeah.
And then leaving that theater to go to like the reduced fare
exactly.
theater.
There used to be like, are there even still tiers of theaters anymore?
I think you pretty much just have your main theater and that's like it.
Yeah, there is no, I'm going to go back to the, what was it called? Gunberry? What was it one place
Danbury.
Called? Okay.
Danbury, the dollar.
Danbury, yeah, dude, yeah.
Yeah, like you don't have
I saw Armageddon there.
that anymore because they stopped being profitable because once we got to like DVDs started coming out quicker than VHSs, and then you hit video on demand, which made it even quicker, and now we're at streaming and it's like near instant.
Yeah.
We're at a situation now where you can have a movie flop hard like fucking Jim and the Holograms and get pulled itself out of theaters in the middle, like the week it was supposed to be like premiering, and be like, all right, we're gonna just slap that on like Netflix. You have a situation where like movies don't even come out anymore, and somebody like Warner Brothers just deletes a whole movie that exists.
Dude, that's wild. Absolutely wild.
So they're being incredibly slow on the uptake, but it's because I think for movies, the problem is that there isn't like an upstart under industry that shows them how trends move quicker. Like in video games, there's like the indie scene, right? And there's people making like $10, $20 games that go crazy in streaming on YouTube, and all these AAA companies are like, well, why aren't we doing that? Mm-hmm. And it's like these smaller companies can move with so much more like mobility to be able to just put something out really quickly, be like within the cusp of like what people are feeling like now and get it done. Whereas like a company like Sony's got to take like 3 to 4 years because they don't know how to do it any differently. And Sony, the movie side, not the video game side, is the same way. They move very slowly because they're so used to being the people that set the trend, they don't realize that they're not that anymore. And these, like, movies are the type of things where, like, I expect, like, Kai Cenat to finally show up in a movie, like, 5 years from now. And by the time he finally shows up in a movie, kids are not going to be caring about Kai's not anymore. It's going to be on to the next, like, new streamer or a new person or whatever. And you can even see that in something like Minecraft, right? The kids are choosing how they want to enjoy this movie. But the movie theaters, the parents, the movie companies, and all the older actors in it are all like, that's not how we do movies. That's not how we enjoy movies. But these kids don't care about what old people think. And younger adults don't care about what movie companies think. If they're not pirating shit, they're just waiting for it to come to streaming because they've got their priorities and how they spend their money. And their priority in spending money isn't going out to the theater. So instead of trying to sit there and scratch your head and be like, man, why didn't Sinners make more money for us? Understand why you have put out a string of movies nobody wanted to see that made. You have to rely on Sinners to ensure that you don't get bought by Disney. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
it's so tough though. It's so tough. I mean, like, how do you? I don't know. I guess as much as I would love to be closer, I think, to the business, there's just like a lot of unanswered questions and considerations about what all goes into the thought process. As one of the movies actually that we're going to be reviewing, that we actually saw before Sinners, funny enough, is Mickey 17, which is also distributed by Warner Brothers. And from what we know so far, and we'll dig more into it during that episode, but they did not get what they thought they were going to get out of Mickey 17, which I also don't know what they expected.
I don't know what you can expect out of a movie like Mickey 17 to do, because, like, yes, it was directed by the guy who directed Parasite, but Parasite was also a sleeper hit that people were shocked won at the Academy Awards. Mm-hmm. Meaning that not many people saw Parasite. So why would you expect, like, people like, oh yeah, I gotta, I gotta go see that because the guy who made Parasite, like, sure, cinephiles probably are that way, but for the most part, like, everyday average Norm and Susie aren't going to be like, dude, I really need to see Mickey 17 because Bone Human Jones, I think is the person.
Did you say Bone Human Jones?
I said Bone Human.
Oh my gosh, I heard something totally different. I'm like, who the fuck is Bone Human Jones?
Bone Human Jones. My name's Bone Human Jones. I'm the man who made Parasite. But no,
Bone Jones is ready.
Bone Soul's ready. Well, 3 minutes of playtime. Alright. Not talking about those things. We need to get back to Sinners.
Sinners, yeah. So if jump into a little quick rundown of what this happens here in this movie. All right. So as James said before, Sinners, it is a period piece film. So it takes place in 1932, where identical twin brothers Smoke and Stack, both played by Michael B. Jordan, return home to the Mississippi Delta after a 7-year stint in Chicago. So wanting to put the past behind them, the brothers purchased a plot of land and a sawmill from Hogwood, played by David Maldonado, which I gotta admit, that name sounds familiar for some reason, but I cannot. When I saw this in IMDb, the movie clip that it had associated with this guy looked like a movie that we made in high school. Which I wish we could show you that, but no, maybe beefs or another time. So yeah, they purchased this plot of land in a sawmill from Hogwood, again played by David Maldonado, who's racist, who informs the pair actually that the KKK no longer operates in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And this is great news for the twins, considering they intend to open their own juke joint for the local black community. So, with a venue secured, Smoke and Stack pick up their cousin Sammy, played by Miles Caton. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, Miles.
Debuting Miles
Caton, by the way. So I'm assuming he's a musical artist. Maybe you gotta look into some of his.
Yeah, he did. Like, he's not a big well-known artist. He started. Like, he was on like a talent show when he's like 12 or something like that.
Oh.
He's done work with her, as well as like a few other artists. But I know I think he went on tour with her. And as we see in this movie, I mean, as well deserved, the brother can sing.
Ooh. Yes. Yes. Which, yeah, we're about to get to all that. Voice cracking like a 13-year-old. So yeah, pick up their cousin Sammy, played by Miles Catan, who is in the film an aspiring guitarist, and they begin preparations for their grand opening. So from here, Smoke actually heads to town to recruit the help of Bo and Grace, who are Chinese immigrants with whom there's actually already an established amicable relationship, and also Annie, played by Wunmi Mosaku, who we come to learn actually is Smoke's estranged wife. So we don't know yet why exactly they are estranged. That will come later. But meanwhile, Stack and Sammy actually head to a cotton field to proposition the 6'6" cornbread, played by Omar Benson Miller. And also I say 6'6", not that they call that out in the movie, but because the actor actually is 6'6". So that from there, followed by a trip to the train station where they recruit the musical talents of pianist Delta Slim, played by your boy Delroy Lindo. And it's here also that Sammy happens upon Pearline, Jamie Lawson, and Stack's former girlfriend, played by Haley Steinfeld. Her name is Mary. So as the sun sets on Clarksdale, here's the thing. We have an ominous figure appears in the form of Remick, Jack O'Connell's character, who is a mysterious figure with supernatural abilities. But what is he exactly? Vampires and more.
I guess I can kind of understand now why you may say Avengers, because this is a I won't say it's star-studded.
There's a lot of people from
there are a lot of Marvel, but I think at this point there's just so many Marvel movies that it's becoming hard to find people who are not in Marvel movies. Like, at this point, 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon must be like the easiest game ever to play, because you just name somebody and there's like 2 Marvel movies, maybe tops, and you're like, yeah, got them. Yeah. But like, there's a lot of just talent in the cast. Mm-hmm. Like a crazy amount of talent in this cast, and some of them you may not have even heard of yet, like Lee Jun Lee or Yao.
Yeah, just Yao. Yeah. I tried to find his last name, but it's just Yao.
And he had like this up and comer Miles, and then you got your like more known like heavyweight actors like Michael, like Delroy. You've got someone like Wunmi who fits so well in being able to be an amazing sporting person, and then you've got Haley, and
which I gotta say for Haley, I've not seen. Admittedly, like I am aware of Haley. Like I know she was Kate Bishop, played Kate Bishop in the Hawkeye series. And actually, she's played in a lot of roles. I think she was in. I never saw that Transformers movie, but I think
she's in Bumblebee. Bumblebee is the first movie I saw her in. I know she's done something beforehand, but I remember I saw her first in Bumblebee, and I was like, okay. And I know she's a recording artist. Like she's got a band.
What?
Yeah. So I know that's also where like she's known from. Like that was kind of also her thing coming up.
Wow, dude, I had no idea. So, yeah, it's just I had not, for as popular as she's becoming, I had not seen any films really, like from beginning to end, or at least too many films with her in it. But she killed it.
She really did. I think like this movie feels like
they all did. Really.
It's in a lot of the ways like the Mary character herself, which feels like it was written for Haley, like because of Haley, that it feels like this is Haley's moment to show maturity in roles. Because you look at things like when I think she was like a teenager when Bumblebee came out, as Kate Bishop in Hawkeye, she's portrayed as this like young, young, late teen, early 20. In this movie, it feels like she's the 28, 29-year-old that Haley actually is. She comes across as an adult in this movie who knows what she wants and isn't that like that little kid that we've seen her be, even though like at this point she's an adult. She's an adult woman, and as such, it even shows in the way that she treats Sammy, who is the kid of the movie, even though he's a 20-year-old. Kind of the way they all treat Sammy is just like you're a kid. You need to kind of step aside and let grown folk do grown folk things. And Haley knocks it out the park. Jamie knocks it out the park. There isn't a single person in this movie that does not knock it out the park.
Absolutely true.
Jack O'Connell knocks it out the park. Man. The whole like that casting director needs to cast all movies because they understood the assignment so perfectly, and I think maybe the casting also occurred while writing. I'm not sure, but like I think because of that, everybody felt like they were just exactly where they were supposed to be and did exactly what they were supposed to do. It honestly did feel like I wasn't watching actors play movie roles. It felt like each of these people were the person they were supposed to be.
Yeah,
and that's when you're like, oh, I get it. That's when you're like so able to be engrossed in a movie that when you come out of it, you're like, dog, I was in a movie. That's right. That's what was happening. I wasn't just like in some people's lives for like 2 hours.
It's one of those films, and the actors in this film just do such a great job with bringing the world to life. And even like adding outside of the actors, the camera work, the directing, all of it blends so perfectly together to bring this world to life. It is one of those films that I feel like you truly come to fear for the well-being of those characters. Mm-hmm. You ever get so engrossed in like a TV show or a film that you almost don't want to finish it because you know or have this bad feeling that something is going to happen that you just don't want to experience, you don't want to accept. And at the end of the day, you know this is a story. You know those actors are still out there living their life, but that's how engrossed you get.
Yeah, I definitely have that. So, I mean, at this point, I think it's like deep in second season. I have not seen the last 2 episodes of The Last of Us, and I've played the video game, so I know what happens at the end of The Last of Us. And I still have not watched those last 2 episodes. So I was like, I know what they're getting to, and I don't want to experience that again. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, no, I can't experience those emotions all over again. No, so I'm just gonna not watch those. But I know I need to watch them so I can get myself into the second season. But I'm just still sitting there like, oh man, I can't do that with these characters again. I don't know how early they. Honestly, I can already because I think I can't even say it was spoiled for me. I've played the second game already, so I know what happens. But I already know that it happens, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, like, if it were me, I would not have done that. I would have. The second season for me would have been the aftermath of season 1, which of course, obviously, even season 2 is that. But like, the DLC that came in the first game, right? Like the part with like the mall, and it would have just been their adventure out to Colorado that they eventually end up in. It would have just been that. I would have left it so that you got a whole season of Joel and Ellie again. Yeah. That way, when that happened, and then first episode of season 3, that's when I would have done it. Because at that point, the amount that you've like connected with him, that would have been.
And you might have actually maybe managed to sort of trick some of the people who are going in with that expectation that it was going to happen in the second season because it happened in the second game. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe they're not going to do it this way. And like you said, first episode of the third season, kind of have one of those moments like in The Walking Dead. Should we just go ahead and put like disclaimers about
there are
everything?
spoilers.
I'm gonna say just spoilers.
I put a spoiler like about 30 minutes ago. If you disregarded that, that's on you. I didn't say it was just a spoiler for the sentence. I said it was a spoiler warning. I might, I'll spoil anything for you.
I might spoil a movie I've never seen.
I'll spoil the end of Cars 3. I don't care. I ain't even seen any of the Cars movies now. Start spoiling.
Neither have I. Maybe we should do one of those like one day. Retrospective Cars, DreamWorks.
But you went over essentially what the movie was about. You did end it kind of at what essentially is the last fourth.
Yeah.
But going back to the beginning, so it is a period film set in 1932, Clarksdale, Mississippi. We are introduced kind of just immediately to what it's like in Jim Crow era South. In this case, it is Mississippi, which is one of the southest states that you can be in at the time. Interestingly enough, we aren't really you don't really see like the Jim Crowness of it probably until about 20 or so minutes in, when they finally kind of get into town. We're introduced to racism relatively early on, but at the very beginning is the end of the movie. Personally enough, it is essentially the last scene of the movie, and then it shows you a day before, and that's when you kind of realize, all the events of this movie happen in one day, which is one hell of a day for pretty much anybody. But we're introduced. We got Sammy. He's sharecropping. He goes into a home that is much more of a shed than what we would consider
there's literally his brothers and sisters
house.
are laying on the floor.
Everybody's laid out in one room. There wasn't really a distinction between rooms. The room that they were all in was also the kitchen. The church itself is just a single building with 7 benches. But these people are making it work for them. They're living. And then we're introduced to Smoke and Stack, who almost seem like direct opposites of what we just saw. Everyone around Sammy's dressed very plainly. They're just, slacks, shirt. They gotta work. But then you see Smoke and Stack. Smoke is dressed in blue. Stack is dressed in red. I kind of think that might be an allusion to the trope of what's known as red oni, blue oni. It's a trope in fiction. You see it more so, giving away the name oni. You see it in more Japanese fiction, but it does, in a sense, play out here, where the red oni, or a demon ogre thing, is the fiery, hot-headed one. And the blue oni is the calm, chill, direct one. And you see that in a lot of different pieces of, Naruto and Sasuke. You even see it in things in Power Rangers a lot, where the Red Ranger is more the active, aggressive one, whereas the Blue Ranger is typically the calm, cool, collected one. In this case, it does also play out with Smoke and Stack. Smoke feels like he's the older one. He's the one that is more calm. He is kind of I don't want to use alpha, but he's the more dominant one. Whereas Stack is a little bit more indulgent, a little bit more hot-headed. He is the one that is the more than likely, he's the slickster of the two. The one that's if alluding to Marvel again, he'd probably be the Loki to Smoke's Thor.
Yeah. There you go. That's what they said.
Yep, that's why it's the Avengers. That's 2 year Avengers right there. Loki and Thor, played by Michael B. Jordan. But yeah, so like you see them, they're dressed nice. They're dressed in the nines, slick suits, caps. Like I said, they got this nice car, and then again, you're immediately hit with a juxtaposition to it when Hogwood shows up, and he's in like a little broke down buggy that he's got to hop out. He's not dressed nearly as well as they are, and he sells them this. I swear they say like 3 different things. I'm going to go with mill. At one point, it's called a barn. At one point, they call it a sawmill. Hogwood himself calls it like a death, like a place where they slaughter pigs. It's a lot. But ultimately, it serves as just what's going to be the eventual setting of the last, like, third of this movie. And you're going to notice, because I can already see it, I'm going to jump between fourth of the movie and third of the movie a lot, because they are 2 different timings. The action, which is when the vampires eventually come to the juke joint, is the last fourth of the movie. However, the movie introduces the juke joint itself as well as the vampires within the last third of the movie. Yeah. So I will jump between those 2 a lot. Just saying, I'm not misstating myself I'm not going against myself when I say those things. And then again, when we see Sammy go into town, well, in this case, he goes into the train station, and you kind of see him against a lot of the other people coming in and off the trains. The way that Pearline looks, the way that Barry looks, so different than what we see at the beginning. And the reason I bring that up is because it is trying to put in your face essentially the way of life, and how even in Clarksdale, Mississippi, how many varying degrees of life that could be, which it does very well. Now, it never makes the city of Clarksdale a character. I'll never say that, because we see so very little of it. But what we do see does show the way of life during that time. Even coming up to when they eventually go into when Smoke goes into town and he meets Bo and Grace and Lisa, and how you can see that despite being in Jim Crow South, even seeing signs that do say the whites only, blacks only sign. Yeah. You don't really see that when Smoke goes into the town strip. And there you actually do see a medley of you see black people, you see white people. We are introduced to Bill and Grace, who are Chinese American. So you can tell there it doesn't matter nearly as much as it does when in the actual town where the train station is. That seems to be much more prevalent. If anybody is wondering, yes, there was a migration of Chinese American people who left California post the Gold Rush and the Chinese Exclusion Act and made their way into the Southeast and eventually Northeast and eventually the Midwest. So it isn't out of inclusion's sake that Bo and Grace are in this story, and it isn't out of left field. It is history that Chinese American people existed in the South during this time. So with that, I will ask if there was anything kind of really particular that kind of stood out to you.
The claim or the sentiment that essentially the 2 twins were not different enough from one another, and that essentially it just kind of felt like you were watching 2 people play the same person, which I thought was odd. I mean, again, from the beginning of the film, your commentary about the blue and red Oni that seemed to shine through, at least for me, very early on, in that Smoke was seemingly the one who had the burden of taking care of Stack, that he felt older, even though they are identical twins, maybe born, a couple minutes earlier or something like that. But he was definitely more direct, whereas Stack was very slick. He could talk. He had that. I mean, didn't he have like a gold piece in his mouth? He was a little bit more showy.
So here's an interesting thing. I don't know if anybody picks this up, because I thought it like how often Stack shows the gold tooth, right? He shows it a lot. Towards the end of the movie, Smoke actually reveals that he has one too, but his is on the opposite side. And because he doesn't do that like smirk sneer that Stack does, you just never see it until he like fully opens his mouth once. And the instant he did that, I was like, oh, he also has a gold tooth. You just never see it.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah. It was really interesting.
But I think about like as far as the glaring differences between those two characters, I think if let's take the train sequence the train scene for instance, take Smoke to the train station and have him try to convince Delta Slim to come play at the juke joint that night, or when Stack was talking to the crowd when he was trying to get everyone hyped up. Imagine Smoke doing that. You probably can't because he doesn't have the personality for it.
No, he's much more. He's mellow, whereas Stack is just definitely like the talk. Like he's the talkative one of that duo. He's the one that I would foresee having been the one that like facilitated getting them into like Capone's gang, getting them the Irish beer, getting them that Italian wine, like getting them. And Smoke would be the one that got them out of the situation that brought them back down into Mississippi. Absolutely.
And I think even there is a point in the film where they pretty much call out that when it comes to, and this is as a quick heads up, there's a thread in the film. There's a lot about these characters that you don't know right off the bat, and I think that's kind of one of like the pleasures of the film. And it's that it's not giving you details to be cheeky. It's more like through the dialogue that you just listen and you experience the film that you get to learn more of what these characters are about. So there is some historical tidbits that you get about Smoke and Stack and their father, and from what it sounds like is Smoke would have been the aggressor who actually would have been the one that killed their father, and Stack wouldn't have. It seems like it's not to say that Stack can't be violent, but Smoke is going to be the one who is going to be more direct and will use that as sort of like an intimidation tactic, whereas Stack doesn't necessarily need to. He might rely on, just talking.
Like he talks his way out of situations, even though because I think even back to like the scene with the snake, Stack is the one that produced the brass knuckle knife. And he gives it to Smoke, and Smoke is the one that deals with the snake.
Yeah.
And then he gives it back to Stack. And it's like, whenever things need to be done, it's like Smoke does it. And whenever things need to be like, maybe handled a certain different way, that's when Stack gets involved.
Yeah.
And they make this like kind of just perfect pair of ne'er-do-wells that like just really, even though we're never explicitly told the timeline of their history, the way the two act lets you know everything you really need to know about the two of them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that whole thing about storytelling through story as opposed to just a person giving you every single bit of information that needs to be given.
Yeah.
For like 90% of this movie, it does a really good job of that. I would say 99% of it. But
I mean, hell, there's even the scene with Cornbread. So when they go to recruit Cornbread, it is, I think, just Stack and Sammy at the time, if I'm not mistaken. But you have this dude who is 6'6". He towers over Stack, right? So physically, but Cornbread is out in this field picking cotton with his wife. And I forget verbatim, like the exact comment that Stack makes, but it was kind of rude. But he's so good with how he talks to people that he quickly flips it. And then actually manages to convince Cornbread's wife to just be like, go do this thing tonight.
And yeah, because Cornbread wasn't really having any of it.
He was not.
But
he was about to fuck somebody up for $2.
His wife ended up being the one who was like, all right, go do it. Because as we learn, and I guess you would probably know if you are well versed in like the history of that period of time, but sharecroppers weren't being paid like true money. And in fact, I mean, it's 1932. We were on the cusp of, I think we were on the cusp of the Great Depression.
Oh, you were right. I think it started in 29.
Like 29, right? We were on the cusp of the end of the Great
yeah.
Depression. So most people didn't have money, but those who did were not sharecropping. So we do find out that the sharecroppers in that area were being given kind of tokens for the nearby stores as opposed to being truly paid money. So when you have a guy coming around telling you he can give you $20, which we found out was like 200 something, or no, 400 something dollars.
Yeah, I was to say, because didn't I remember? So complete transparency. This is actually the second time that we're recording this episode, and I think the first time that we attempted, you said that $2, the equivalent of $41,
Yeah, it was like $41
back then.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, like $200. I mean,
like,
$20.
So, yeah, so like $20 is like $400 something dollars.
10 times more than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think Q's going to pay Delta Slim $40, which was like $800 something dollars. So at that time, being able to throw around what we look at as like $40, like that was a lot of money back then, and seemingly for this guy to have that type of money meant that during that time it meant that you were up to no good. Like that wasn't an amount of, unless you, especially if you're black.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
Like, sure, I'm sure like John D. Rockefeller's kid could have been throwing that kind of money around very easily, but we know where he would have gotten his money from. We don't know where Smoke and Stack got their money from, but
wink,
we
wink.
know that like everyone seems to know a lot about the twins even after they left, and it's seemingly that a lot of people just never thought they'd come back. So everybody was really surprised to see that they came back, but also kind of like, oh man, these dudes are back. That means Trouble's back as well. And
There's a pants thief on the loose.
Mm-hmm. So everyone's kind of on their toes about this, but everyone also probably missed them because they all seem to be like really close to each other. The group of people that come to end up being the Avengers of this vampire movie do all know each other. Well, Sammy knows his cousins, but everybody else seems to know Sammy. Little Sammy was probably a kid when they were all doing their like the adventures that I actually really want to see.
Because the movie does leave you wanting a lot more.
Those, like, it seems like whatever was happening in maybe like 1920 to 1922, maybe 1924, that I want to see that, because it's kind of alluded to that some stuff was going down and all these people were a part of it, but not Sammy. Sammy was being a good little preacher boy back on a plantation. You were saying something earlier about cinematography. What did you think about like when he got into town, Smoke did, and how there's the whole thing with like him going into the store, talking to Lisa. Lisa's like, I gotta go get Mama. She goes,
I thought that was so cool.
like, to leave. The camera follows her, and she goes across the street. She gets to Grace in a grocery store. Says, Daddy want to see you. Leaves with Grace. And at this point, it like the camera kind of attaches to her. That she became the new main character.
Yeah.
But it doesn't like flip immediately around her. It like actually follows her like backwards back out of there, and then kind of goes around her to lead her into the.
Yeah, because I think so during that scene when you're following Lisa across the street, you are directly behind her, so you only see the back of her head. And yeah, so like you said, when they get across the street and they sort of do this handoff, and it's Grace coming back, yeah, it's all frontal, like square on. And it's oftentimes I do wonder about shots like that, because, and I've said this before, you'll probably, especially as an audience, if you guys stick with us, probably hear me say this a lot. A film is 2 hours, in this case, 2 hours and 17 minutes of your life. It does not take them 2 hours and 17 minutes to make the movie. So all that to say, there's a lot of decisions are very intentional. Oftentimes things just aren't left in for the sake of leaving something in. The colors that a director chooses to use or the cinematographer chooses to use, the angles they use for shots, there's a lot that kind of goes into setting up a scene that is almost just kind of subtextual. And so I wonder with that, like, what is it trying to say? Are they two sides of the same coin, for instance? Because of course later on at the juke joint we see that is a very touchy point for Grace, when Remick brings that up. So I'm sure we'll get to that. But what do you think about? Do you think that shot meant anything else? The way that they handed that off?
I don't know. Like, honestly, I kind of feel like it may have just been because it's hard to know with Ryan Coogler. To me, I wonder if there was an actual meaning behind it, or if it was something that he was trying to just pay homage to, because it kind of almost had a feeling of like a Spike Lee joint in that that little instance. Like Spike Lee is like famously kind of tracking joint with the as the camera follows the person from the front. So I think it may have been just kind of his like take on that, and it was just his like, let me see like what we can do with this, like, because ultimately, how it made what probably was a mundane scene more lifelike. Because ultimately, all it was a girl walking across the street, getting her mom, and then her mom walking back across the street. That could have been just like, that could have easily have just been like a landscape shot in the middle of the street. She walked across, the other one came back, and then they just went back into like the store. Yeah,
or like they could have even just done it to where you maintain focus on. You can say Bo tells Lisa, go grab your mom. And you just maintain focus on Bo and Smoke, and then she leaves. Grace comes in. You don't have to do any of that.
And I also kind of think it may have been as a means of like introducing you to Grace, because the characters themselves don't talk about the fact that there were just some Chinese Americans, like specifically like 3 Chinese Americans here. From an audience standpoint, clearly you're like, where'd they come from, right? And admittedly, when you see Yao doesn't immediately scream to you like this dude's just like that's a Chinese American. He kind of has a bit of like a vagueness to him, where you're like, okay, when he turned into like Lisa, like that's my daughter. I was like, okay. So when you then finally see Grace, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. that is her daughter. So
you mean like that is her daughter in the sense
no, like not her daughter, like not
only without
it's like you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's their daughter.
Yeah.
So it may have been kind of that way, just introducing Li Junli and being like, yep, there you go. But it also just brings life to what would have been like. You may think like this thing wasn't needed, but then you get that camera shot, and you're like, oh, I'm glad that was in there. So that's like just one of many times that he uses the camera in a way that helps kind of also even just like shake up things. So you just kind of got that like really funny scene like right before it where
Smoke shoots the 2 assailants, trying to rob the truck.
So you were just laughing at that, and I think I forgot in the gumbo, the genre gumbo comedy, there are very funny moments in the movie, but I don't think it's going out of its way to try to be funny as much as it's like almost just trying to relieve a tension that's just always there. And then as soon as that tension is relieved for like a second, it just builds itself right back up.
Right.
And a lot of that tension is just through the Smokestack twins themselves, because people are just kind of always on like eggshells with them. it's just a constant wonder of like when the fuck are they about to pop off? And interestingly enough, they never truly do pop off. They kind of stay at like an even pace until the vampires show up, and at that point, it's like the vampires forced everybody to pop off, as opposed to them like something internal causing the conflict.
But you get those hints of it, right? Like those hints that like they're obviously walking on eggshells around these folks for a reason, and you get the hints of it. I think with the scene that you just brought up, or at least the sort of comedic relief, which is kind of funny to call it comedic relief when it would involve two people getting shot. But it's done in a funny way, like where they shoot them. As far as just showing that they can pop off, and that there is a reason why, because especially with Smoke, it seems that he has no qualms. It seems they have a code. Let me put it this way: it seems they have a code that they sort of run by. They're not just like, even you see that in how Smoke interacts with the girl that he commissions to wash the truck for him when he goes to Bo and Grace's shop. But yeah, like there's this sense in that they're kind of unpredictable. But I do wonder, and again, this is something that I think we'll sort of pivot towards as we're like talking about the end of the film specifically, and what that day meant for them. Like, I wonder if that's why we don't really see that, why we only get the hints, because you think about, from the audience perspective, you're watching this film having seen the trailer, and so you know that there's going to be a pivot at some point. But if you're thinking about what is this movie like, and from the perspective of the characters, the actors that you're watching portray these characters and bring this whole story to life, they don't know that. They have this huge, amazing business prospect ahead of them, that for them, I mean, this is probably one of the most exciting times of their life, and especially coming from Chicago, where they were, I suppose, again, like working for Al Capone. This is probably a lot less stressful of a business venture than, being a gun for hire. So I would say, like, is that part of the reason maybe why we see more of people's feeling tension around Smoke and Stack, but us not really seeing them just be so aggressive that they're just like complete assholes. Again, it could be that they have a code, or just that what does that day mean to them?
And I think, honestly, I do think they probably toned it down because they had plans on opening a juke joint, but they carry themselves like gangsters, and I think that is probably part of the reason that everybody's kind of walking on eggshells with them. Just simply because they know how dangerous the two can be. Their attention allows us to understand that these two are dangerous. Even though, I mean, yes, they themselves kind of show it with like the flashing the guns to Hogwood, or killing the snake, or shooting the man in the behind and then another one in the kneecap. All these things do show that there's like a danger behind them that is warranted. And it isn't until we get towards the end that we're like, okay, their danger works in their favor, and it can work against them. That kind of brings us to like the middle of the movie, which is the whole them assembling everybody to open up the juke joint. And at that point, like, we've already been introduced to pretty much everybody except for maybe Annie at this point. Played by Wunmi, where we learn about her being essentially a witch doctor, but also we learn more about her and Smoke. As Smoke comes to her residence / business, he goes to a grave. We talked about it in our previous version of this. I thought that was his father, because that was the last time that we heard anything about Smoking like somebody being dead.
Yeah.
We learn at the end of the movie that that's not the case. It's probably my one biggest criticism of the movie, is that's that one time where the storytelling
didn't make it clear.
Only because I don't think there needed to be a payoff. If you were trying to keep that under wraps, and like the irony terms, like trying to make the audience also learn something like later on, I wouldn't have chosen that to be that thing. And effectively, I mean, we already said it was a spoiler, so you better have seen this movie. Essentially, what happens at the end of the movie, we find out that Smoke and Annie had a child that seemingly must have died because in afterlife it's still a child, like a baby, probably died in like
infancy.
wedlock or infancy. So the two have a history. They are lovers, or they were lovers. It's hard to say were when 10 minutes into
their meeting,
they're having sex, which, I mean, more power to them, but it is interesting. Also, she didn't lock doors. She just had some kids in there. Anybody could have walked in on that. What the fuck's happened in 1932? Could that just happen? Could you just walk into like
and just see two people
like,
fighting?
oh shit! So I'll leave this Sears Roebuck now.
To be honest with you, I mean, who knows? People do a lot of stuff for that social media clout.
I mean, there's a difference between social media clout and doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously for them, there was no 1932 Instagram to try to.
So,
oh man, I'm fucking in a witch doctor's office.
Like I couldn't imagine just walking into like a Montgomery Ward in 1932 and being like, oh. I guess I'll come back later. I'll come back later and go to Sears. But yeah, so like we're learning about these characters. We're learning more about Smoke and Stack. We're learning about Sammy, who is very conflicted in this movie. He wants to be like Smoke and Stack, but Smoke and Stack don't want. Well, I should say Smoke does not want him to be like them. Stack is. He's up in the air about it. Like, he does speak on the dangers of their life. When Sammy brings up wanting to go to, like, maybe go to Chicago, like they did, he'll say, hey, man, you could be anywhere. Like, maybe you could do this here. Why would you need to go to Chicago for it, right? Sammy doesn't want to be his father. Sammy doesn't like the life he has. And through the introduction of music, he feels that he can lead a life that isn't that. He can lead a more exciting life. He can lead a life that he finds more fulfilling. He doesn't want to be the preacher boy because he doesn't want to be a preacher. Honestly, throughout the movie, I'm not even really sure how, like, I don't know how deeply religious he is. Because throughout the events of that night, he doesn't really, like, look to God for saviorship or guidance as much as he just kind of looks to Smoke and Stack for that. So he's a deeply conflicted a person at this point who is ultimately looking for what I think becomes like the overarching thread of this movie, and its overarching theme. Theme is the better word, and I would say it's freedom. Everyone wants to be free in this movie. Sammy wants to be free of the life that he currently is in. Mary wants to be free of the life that was kind of forced upon her, and she wants to be able to make her own decisions. Smoke and Stack want to be free of their past, and they want to be able to turn the juke joint into their future. Annie wants the freedom of bearing the weight that her and Smoke both have in having a deceased child.
I would even say with like Pearline,
Pearline has
since
her own.
she's maybe wanted to be free potentially from her husband. It seems like there's maybe
we never see this man.
Right.
Is she married?
So she claims.
She claims this, but she says she's married to him. We never see a ring. She shows up at the juke joint by herself, having walked there. Is definitely prepared to just have sex with Sammy. Oddly enough, when the end happens and she's gone, no one says anything about Pearline anymore. No husband shows up and be like, oh, my Pearline.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing goes for like a lot of the characters though, right? Like, no one says anything about Cornbread, like...
We already saw Cornbread's wife.
True. I guess it's just one of those things where it just wasn't... I had just assumed that it wasn't necessary, like, absolutely necessary. That the fact that she brought it up, just assumed that was enough for the director to be like, hey, she has it, but she's... maybe not in a position where she wants.
I mean, it's very possible. It's just also very possible that she used it as a means of like trying to deflect Sammy at the beginning because her and Sammy do seem to know each other to some degree, having seen each other before. When she basically brings it up when he kind of seems to be coming on to her that she's married, and then he kind of comes on to her again, and then at that point she kind of says something akin to like, I don't think you can handle this. So it is seeming like she's trying to push him away, but she does end up going to the juke joint after hearing him perform. But yeah, she has her own freedom that she's searching for. Mm-hmm. I would even say
even Remick.
Like Remick himself, yes, he's looking for freedom in having to be a vampire. Mm-hmm. Like it seems that he wants to be a vampire, but he also wants to be able to experience the afterlife, see his ancestors again, see the people that he saw. Because we don't know how old Remick is, but seemingly through the way that he acts, it seems, and the gold that he has, he probably is from like some hundreds of years ago, and has just been having to roam the world for so long, and he doesn't want to do that anymore. It's hard to tell if he doesn't want to be a vampire anymore, or if he wants to just be able to see his ancestors again, because he's turning people, but he doesn't seemingly want to end himself. And even when he's finally ended, it's not like oh, thank God I'm finally done. It's more like damn it. Mm-hmm. But
like I was so close.
I almost had everything, and then it just got taken from me. So yeah, freedom seems to be a very overarching theme, and we see it from Sammy all the way from the beginning all the way to the end with him. Even with him seemingly being the last survivor, he's the one that gets his freedom, and everyone else kind of has to have their freedom through death.
Which it does make me wonder, just kind of going to the title of the movie, and I'm thinking about everyone who died, and relatively speaking, what sin. You know how what is that fucking franchise called? Friday the 13th. Dude, that was way harder than that needed to be. But for Friday the 13th, you know how it is when if on camera there's that teenage couple having sex, they gotta die. Mm-hmm. Like automatically acts for the sin. And I was thinking about the characters that died in the movie, and it made me wonder with Sammy, because you have, I guess we don't know for sure if they divorced, but we can kind of assume, right, with them being gangsters and killers, that Smoke and Stack are sinners. Perline, infidelity, adultery. You have all these people that are committing sin, and then even with Sammy, we don't know his sexual history, but I mean, yes, he's going on a married woman, and then he kind of pays for it, right, with the whole side of his face.
I would say the sinners part of it probably comes from just the juke joint itself. Like a place like a juke joint was seen by Christian crowds as being like a hedonist den. Yeah. You also got to look at the fact that we're still in the mid, like not the middle, we're at the tail end of Prohibition. There's liquor and alcohol abound inside of a juke joint, especially if you're treating a juke joint like a speakeasy and trying to hide that. So everyone in there sinned that night.
And even with Sammy's father, I mean, what did he tell him exactly before he even left with Smoke and Stack?
Not don't do that. Just, like
music
don't
leads
be around us. Like music leads to sin.
Isn't he?
If it's not like music for the Lord, blues. Basically, it was about blues and blues leading to sin. And there's that whole thing about and I won't remember his name. I won't even try to. But essentially, kind of like the history of the guy who sold his soul to the devil for the ability to play music, which partly led to blues, which is that's a false story, but it's like a story basically kind of saying a person so talented in music that he must have gotten his ability from the devil. And so churchgoers were not the blues was the devil's music to them. And here you have Sammy, who's proficient, super talented in it, right? And I thought you had some blue corn tortilla chips when you were pulling them out there.
No, dude. These are unique brand pretzels. I'm in prep right now, competition prep, and I'm very hungry. And I've got enough calories for some pretzels. So get some pretzels.
the labors of building a physique. So, in the middle of the movie, we are also introduced to our antagonist, Remick, who is a vampire. He shows up in pretty spectacular fashion, and he also
Beautiful shot.
It's a really cool shot. When you go see the movie, you'll see it. Like, oh, that is pretty cool. And it's interesting because that shot is also in the trailers, but there's a specific part of it not shown, and that's the fact that he's on fire. He essentially just kind of shows up, and in the movie we see him, he's kind of still lightly on fire and smoking. You don't really see that. It just kind of looks like he was running away from something in the trailer, which is the story that he gives to the married couple, the racists. You all right there, Chief? I should have known as soon as you got them pretzels, you was gonna be choking because them pretzels is dry.
Man,
them pretzels,
so good. It's even changed. You see my voice, huh? Oh man,
them pretzels looked dry when he pulled them boys out.
It's not so. I mean, the way you're saying it is not that it's hurting my feelings right now, but I feel like you need to have one of these pretzels to kind of understand how delicious it is.
He went to town on just a half a pretzel, and the next thing I know,
yeah, that salt dust kind of got me. There's a lot of friction in the salt, kind of lacerate it.
And you should say these aren't it ain't soft pretzels to eat. These are some hard pretzels.
Hard. That's why I moved back from the mic, just so it doesn't pick up. I'll get.
Admittedly, that crunch sounded good. I will not lie. It's very good crunch sound. Where was I? So, we're introduced to him. He does some, he claims that some Indians are chasing him. The racist couple says, no, they got guns in his face. Eventually, he kind of, he says he's down for the cause, which, if you know what the cause is, for white people wearing white robes. That they were like, okay, you
Ice
can
cream
come in.
truck, man.
So they let him in. Indians show up. They're like, hey man, there's some foul stuff going on. Don't let certain people into your house. Please tell me he's not already there. They lied to the Indians. And the Indians are like, it's getting kind of late out here, so we're going to leave. They leave.
And so another real quick thing about that scene though, this group, the indigenous group coming in, and yet it's another layer of story that I think all of us were like, I want to see a movie where it follows that
I would
group
love
of
to see
hunters.
These Native American vampire hunters.
Oh my goodness.
And their horses and pickup trucks.
Yes.
Because that seemed like there was a whole story that just could have been a story in itself. I would love to see dude, it'd be crazy if there was just a movie with them and they were killing vampires and then they got to Remick and they chased him and it ended at that scene.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, that'd be so cool, man. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever saw Prey. It is a Predator
That's a Predator movie, right? Yes,
yeah.
yes, I have seen that one.
It takes place in, I don't know if it's 17 or 1800s. But yeah, it's a group of indigenous people that are fighting one of the first known predators that hit Earth. Mm-hmm. So it kind of gave me a little bit of that feel. But I also just love the style. They were clad in black. They had everything about that.
They were pretty cool.
I was so ready for more.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping they were going to show back up. Spoiler alert, they do not show back up. But we get Remick, and Remick is a very interesting character because when you're looking at the trailer, in your mind you're thinking, oh, here we go, black director, a bunch of black actors, and then all of a sudden, Whitey shows up. And clearly this must be some type of, evil white people versus all the good black people story. And it turns out it's nothing like that. Yes, there are racist white people in this movie. And yes, there are a bunch of black people in this movie. But it isn't so black and white. And I hate to use that term because I just talked about black and white people. But it isn't so, cut, dry, black and white. All of the characters in this movie, they are both saints and sinners. They have their goods, they have their bads, their ups and their downs. Mm-hmm. And when you see a character like Remick is so interesting in that he is supposed to be evil. There's no, if he's busy, like, is he not? Like, he is supposed to be evil. Like, he's a vampire, and the movie starts out telling you that, like, there are voices in this world that can be so powerful that they can do such great things. They're so powerful that they do have the ability to heal, but that healing also allows an evil.
Yeah.
And in this case, they were being quite literal. This is the evil. Remick is here, and he is supposed to be an evil person. You're not supposed to be at the end of this movie like, Remick was right.
Yeah.
So, like, but it's also not like, oh, he's so evil. He kicks kittens up in the trees and sets them on fire. Like, he's evil in the way that life can be evil. In the way that, like, a person can be evil, having seen you go through trial and tribulation and offer you, like, safety, but only for their own means. His whole deal, and the whole fact that, like, him being Irish and this, like, dual kind of thing with, like essentially black music versus white music, right? Like, you have, like, but they're both cultures. And it was about cultural identity as opposed to, like, racism. Remick doesn't call these black people N-word. He does not, like, look at them as being less than.
Yeah.
He sees them as essentially, he just sees them as a means to an end. He sees all the black people around Sammy as a means to getting to Sammy, and he sees Sammy as his means of being able to see his ancestors again. But again, like I said earlier, he's not asking to be killed and be back with his ancestors. He's just asking to be able to see them again. Mm-hmm. He wants to be able to toe both lines of life and death without any of the consequences. And when you think about it that way, it makes more sense as to why he goes about throughout the entire movie the way he does. Why he treats everyone around him, like, with a cultish type of, like, love. Why he speaks of fellowship. Why he essentially consistently points out problems to them and says, I am the one that can solve those for you. But again, that doesn't make him right. At the end of the day, like, what was going to happen was probably going to be that none of these people would be ever the same. And they would have to deal with what he dealt with. And now they were going to have their own problems. And there's not even a telling of if, like, what he was going to do with Sammy. If he turned Sammy, would Sammy still have the ability to sing in a way that allowed them to see everything? Mm-hmm. Would they, like, there's just so much, right? And when I started to realize that Remick was not going to be just like a racist caricature, I was like, okay, you got me with the vampires, because I was really just expecting
racist
a bunch
vampires.
of white racist Klansmen vampires, and you didn't give me that, and I actually really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was much more complex than that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, like you mentioned, Remick preaching a lot about or emphasizing a lot was the idea of fellowship. And you're right, like, it seemed more that he actually admired the culture than feeling like he needed to take and suppress or oppress it. Mm-hmm. But it did make me, like, I am curious as to, it's like, to your point about what was he planning to do with Sammy, because very clearly towards the end there, he had every opportunity, with as quickly as some of those people were turned throughout the sort of the third act of that film, he could have very quickly turned Sammy if that was part of it. I mean, mm-hmm. Sammy was sort of unprotected towards the very end there for a decent amount. But it was almost kind of like, I don't know. But it's also one of those things where I kind of wonder, is this one of those moments where the villain is just kind of playing with their food and arrogance has kind of gotten the better of them?
It's so hard to tell, because at one point, like, he literally just comes to them and be like, hey, I want Sammy, right? But, like, you would think when he turned, and this is where I kind of wonder about the whole, like, how vampires work in this world. So it's kind of pretty much, like, it's established pretty early on that these are, like, an amalgamation. Like, they're, like,
hive.
These are a bunch of different types of vampires put into, like, one type of vampire, right? Like, So, like, one of the big things that works for the story is the whole, like, being, like, needing to be invited in to a building in order to do anything.
Right.
But then there are other things that I partly think he was using as a means to try to, and again, this is what I was saying before about the whole, how much I wish that it was never let on that vampires were going to be in this movie. Because obviously, once we get into like the real vampire part of this movie, it's trying to play up the thought that you may not know who is a vampire. And so it uses the invitation as a means of telling you that this person's a vampire, because he rarely ever shows anybody get bit. But there's also a secondary one, which only happens twice. Once with Remick and once with Mary. And it's the drooling. And it's very weird that only happens twice and then that never rears its head again. But I bring that up because if he had just also the whole thing with the hive mind mentality, right? Like it seems like they're somewhat controlled by Remick, but they also must seemingly have some form of autonomy, because you would think in turning Mary, his first thing would have been go inside and get Sammy. And her first thing is go inside and get Stack.
Yeah. So
she seemingly had autonomy in that, and I guess he was just constantly giving them autonomy until he decided, okay, you guys aren't doing what I'd like you to do, and they already figured out the vampire thing. So how about I just go talk to him and see if we can get Sammy out here? But I think we talked about it after we watched it, and we also kind of talked about it in our previous attempt at this. The whole using the invite as a means of kind of creating a barrier between the non-vampires and the vampires, which allowed us to kind of get into the vampire world when we saw like the Celtic dance and like the little Irish jig that he was doing.
Which was so cool.
And it really was cool because they worked as like a juxtaposition to the scene where Sammy sang. And there, you were like, "Oh man, we're getting the past, we're getting the present, we're getting
a mixture of cultures,
and the future. We're getting all this." And then you go over there, and it's also technically a mix of cultures because there are like a bunch of black people and white people, and they're all dancing and stuff. But like, it's Remick's culture and only Remick's culture, as opposed to like this mixture of cultures.
Yeah,
and it's almost like a battle at that point. And it allowed for us to have them sit there and have conversations amongst each other without there having to be action, like a fight. So that when the fight finally happens, it's really just been this like rising tension overflow. Yeah. And as soon as that overflow happens, that's when all hell breaks loose.
Which is cool because again, like when we once again sort of touch upon the form of a movie and how the movie is sort of segmented. Again, Marvel movies. How often in a Marvel movie do you kind of know what to expect as far as when the action marks are? Mm-hmm. You know, typically, even if you go back to like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, you can probably expect he's going to engage the main villain of this film 2 or 3 times. There's going to be these intermittent fights, and then finally there's the final battle. But instead of... And I think also I should say it kind of goes beyond that. Any movie with action, there's typically, you know, several sort of beats of action sequences to sort of push the movie along. But to your point, yeah, like with it just being these musical numbers and displays of culture, you get to build into one single final true fight without needing to do it multiple times and finding different ways to make it fresh within the same film.
Mm-hmm. We've kind of gotten ourselves up to our end point here, which is, as we kind of said, people have been getting turned throughout the night at the juke joint. Mary is the first one. After Mary is Cornbread. After Cornbread...
I'm gonna get that cornbread.
Actually, I should say, after Mary is a bunch of people we just don't know about yet. Because because they don't know that it's vampires yet. Mm-hmm. After we find out that Mary is turned and she attacks and seemingly kills Stack, Smoke lets everybody else out. which means he just let them out into the lion's den, basically. So they all get turned, but we don't see them for a while.
And I didn't think about that. At first, when that scene happened, and everyone exits, because what is it that happens? So it's actually when Mary attacks Stack, right? Or is it when the guy slashes the dude across the face with a razor blade?
Those two things happen simultaneously.
Right. Okay.
So they're in the gambling den, and he cuts, and then he's asking for Stack. And the reason, and I didn't come to really realize why he may have been wanting Stack so bad until we were just going over their like personality traits. And I think to Smoke, Stack would have smoothed things over across with everybody better through word, whereas Smoke is just very action oriented, which is why he was the one that came in and immediately kind of stopped that dude with the switchblade and like, took him out. So he probably wanted Stack there as that balance to then be able to kind of smooth things over. So at the same time that that's happening, Mary is with Stack within mere seconds, turning on him and biting him pretty badly, draining. I shouldn't say she drained him of his blood so much as she let the blood get all over the place. And then Smoke finds out that's happening. He shoots Mary a bunch of times. Mary just pops back up, and then she does her Chucky run out of the
that was very Chucky-like.
The barn out into the night.
What did she say again? I'm sorry. As she was running away, like, we gonna be back.
We're gonna be back. He's gonna be back for y'all. And then she just kind of dips out.
I'll be back.
And at that point, instead of being like, okay, I'm gonna keep everybody in here because the crazy person's outside, they're like, okay, well, she ran off to the darkness. Everybody leave. Juke joint's done. Everybody, I guess they didn't see that happen because they're actually pretty disappointed that the juke joint's over.
If I saw that happen, I would have understood.
But I guess they didn't see that happen. They were, I think, at that same time, Perlene was singing.
Oh, was she?
Mm-hmm. She was singing and cat crawling across the stage, and
that would have been after though that Sammy went.
Yeah, Sammy's thing would have been. That would have been after. So she was feeling it. She was feeling herself. And so those three things were happening pretty simultaneously. So I can understand a large portion of people not knowing what was happening. And then when they were trying to figure out, Smoke just said, "All right, y'all gotta leave." So they all get bit. There's no way. At this point, they just ran out into 4 vampires who can do things very quickly, and they take care of them pretty quickly. But we don't see them. Instead, we get Cornbread, who goes out to go take a leak. Instead of taking a leak in the vicinity of the barn, which if you see this movie and you see the small bastion of light that is surrounding the barn, you would not go out into the darkness, especially considering he himself just saw Mary, bloody mouth and all, skedaddle herself out into the darkness. But
he probably was so far away. That's just how far away he walked to pee. It seemed like
she probably didn't run past him. Now that I think about it. So he's taken out. So at this point, there are like 8 people left. Stack is in there. He turns, breaks down the door, and like flattens Sammy, and then he's off.
So real quick, they did one of those things in this movie that always sends a shiver down my spine, and it's with the whole peephole that Stack creates.
Oh my lord!
That shit
peephole
kills me in movies when they do that. So essentially, you have Stack and Smoke on either side of a door. They've locked Stack in the room that he and Mary were in. Once they realize that he's dead, and Annie realizes that they might be dealing with vampires because she understands that he's probably about to be reanimated. So Sammy comes super close to the door, and all of a sudden, boom, a knife
goes through that door.
Clean. Creates a big enough hole that essentially just is a peephole now. So Smoke takes his turn, comes up, and he's looking through the hole. And the entire time I'm like,
he could just bring that knife back through. I was like, why are you getting so close? You can just look at a distance and be like, yeah, man, how you doing? He brings his face and eyeball directly onto the hole. And I guess maybe like vampires I guess maybe vampires don't attack with weapons or something like that.
So they're just not expecting that he would use. He puts his eye so close to the hole. It kind of reminds me of one of those old school Apple Jacks commercials where they use the magnifying glass. They're like, oh, it's got apple crystals. Like he puts his eye directly on that motherfucker.
Him and Stat could have been touching eyeballs.
Yeah,
they were
like
so
straight
close.
up eyeball make-out session.
It was very weird. Like I would not have known that knife had just come through there. That's an easy way to lose a whole eye.
Yeah,
but somehow he doesn't. And then it does this kind of I guess more horror movie thing where like it gets quiet. And the instant it got quiet, I was like, man, something about to happen.
Yep.
And then sure enough, that door blasts open. Sammy's on the ground. Stack's on top of him.
On top of the door.
And then I was like, oh man, he's about to go for Sammy. Nope, he goes for Smoke. They get him off and he just runs off. And at that point, they figure out that it's vampires because Annie threw pickled garlic on him, and that really hurt him. So
that's right. That would have been
That's when she's like, oh, these are not the hate or skinwalkers, but these are vampires.
Yep.
So then, I believe at that point, old Cornbread shows back up and starts trying to ask to be let inside, and they're like, nope.
He doesn't want to be rude.
No, sir. He gets rude anyway. So he starts calling everybody and their mama out their name. And proceeds to ask to be let in. They say no. He asks for his money. Smoke at this point has gotten kind of dumb. And I guess it must be because his brother died. Instead of just tossing the money out, he proceeds to try to hand this man who they are saying is a vampire the money, and he's almost bit for it. But he's good. Bo, who was already walked out at this point to get the car, also turned. And Remick finally shows back up with Bo.
That's where about we get the epiphany here that this is this really is kind of like a hive mind, because essentially anything that the people at the juke joint know, Bo, anyone included that Remick has turned, he knows everything about him. I mean, Remick even starts to speak Mandarin fluently, where he tells Grace that they might just go back to town and pay Lisa, their daughter, a little visit, which Grace
wasn't having that.
She was not having it. She wasn't feeling it. She didn't want any of it.
Grace was ready to throw down, but everybody tried to keep her calm. Eventually, they mock her enough that she is the one that the cup spilleth over on, and she finally invites everybody in. Now, the problem is, I'm guessing that the Avengers at this point don't know exactly how many people are out there. They learn very quickly that there are a lot of people out there because they get jumped. And it's at this point where me and Farrah realized while we were watching the movie separately from each other that something seemed to miss, because the Avengers there are all pretty much just Grace, Annie, Perlene, Sammy, Smoke, and Delta.
Yeah.
And so they've lost Mary and Stack. They lost those two, and they lost Cornbread and Bo. So it's kind of them.
About that scene is, so before Grace invites the vampires in, again, not realizing, oh wait, didn't we just tell 45 people to go leave out there into a den of vampires? But before this, there is a scene that is very much reminiscent of John Carpenter's The Thing. So if you haven't seen John Carpenter's The Thing, Carpenter, why is his last name so hard to say? John C's, not Cena. John, let me just say John Carpenter. Carpenter, The Thing.
The Thing, if you haven't seen
The Thing. If you haven't seen The Thing, with Russell Crowe and Keith David, there's a scene in that movie where not Russell Crowe, I apologize. Kurt Russell. Russell's in there. There's a Russell in there.
Russell Crowe's in this movie.
Kurt Russell and Keith David. That man's voice, dude. I'm sorry. But there is a scene that's very reminiscent from The Thing. So in The Thing, there is a but you have an alien entity that I guess is, I mean, it's kind of like a hate. It's a skinwalker.
It's a skinwalker, yeah.
Yeah, like it takes the shape of humans and it morphs into a crazy alien. But one of the weaknesses of the alien is fire. So I think what they do, if I'm not mistaken, they like draw blood and then they take a torch to the petri dish that has their blood in it, and then if the blood reacts a certain way, then they know that person was part of the thing. And so now saying it, because actually Annie, as you mentioned, Annie has brought up in this film several times the word hate, which I didn't know until you told me meant skinwalker. So I wonder now, do you think Ryan Coogler, knowing that there was sort of the possibility, or with the character Annie, that it could have been either or, used that as sort of a reference to the thing?
Again, it's a possibility. The man loves his movies. So it's hard to tell whenever it's just an idea that he kind of like, I want to bring some tension here that adds on to the other tension. Because, again, we're supposed to be in a situation where we don't know who is what.
I know we're kind of going to tangent into a rabbit hole, but it was one of those things, I got to admit, like even then in the movie, I didn't think it was necessary, because there just hadn't been enough that happened inside of the joint that even gave me, from an audience perspective, like, oh shit, somebody in there is a vampire.
And I think that's why they did the whole, like, the dude passed out.
Right. But even then, I was like, well, there's no one. I was like, it's
in your mind, but in your mind, you also like, it's because they've almost explicitly shown you, with the exception of all the people that were outside, they've shown you each important person be turned. Mm-hmm. So in your mind, you're probably thinking like, oh, there ain't, unless it's a extra that we just didn't know about that got turned. If that dude was bitten, it would have had to have happened at the same time that it was happening with Mary and Stack. So it did leave the wide group of them to be. Obviously, it couldn't really be Sammy or Smoke, but it could be Annie. It could be Delta. It could be Perlene. It could be Grace, because we weren't immediately privy to. Well, it couldn't be Delta because Delta was at the door. But the other three, it could have been them because we weren't direct. Well, Perlene again was singing, so it could be Annie or it could be Grace. If we were looking at it, if we were looking at it from just like our perspective of what we saw, those would be the only two who we didn't know exactly what they were doing at the immediate time that those like three big actions were taking place.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't. I personally was not suspicious of those two, so it kind of felt like, as far as building tension, I was like, I don't think any of them are vampires. But I also, with a guy who had collapsed, knowing that he had been slashed in the face, to be honest with you, I had kind of made the assumption that he had passed out from like blood loss from the wound. That's where my mind went to before it was, oh, he got bit by a vampire and he's now just like unconscious. But the whole reason I even bring that up in the first place is because when they're in a circle, they're using this pickled garlic to determine who's a vampire and who's not. So they're passing around this jar, and some people, given it's a life or death situation, probably play around a little too much. Looking at you, Perlene and Delta, but it does make for an entertaining scene. But the whole point is, there is no one else in that circle that they feel the need to eliminate from the possibility of being a vampire, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just them in that circle. But as you were getting at, when the vampires are invited in by Grace, immediately you see what?
There's at least three. I'm pretty sure it was between 1 and 3.
Random people that we've never seen
just get attacked. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know who these people are.
Exactly.
Because the way that the scene is set up is, and even in the way the scene is set up, so the Avengers all get in front of this table that's set up with a bunch of different weapons that they've procured.
I love that you've like really like settled into calling them the Avengers.
So you got Hawkeye and Black Widow, aka Sammy and Perlene, who've been given looks like some Winchesters to be the back line. Captain America Smoke he's got the close-up weaponry, but he's also got his twin pistols. But he's got the close-up weaponry. He's got the stakes. The Human Torch has decided to pull out a Molotov cocktail that she is going to light, and by she I mean Grace, is going to light and throw at the vampires the instant that the barn doors are open. Annie I think Annie is also with Smoke, and she's got herself some steaks. And then Delta, Nick Fury, is just kind of near Sammy and Perlene, but he's got him some weapons too. So when the doors open, they are all still by that table. The doors open, and the first person you see is Remick. Grace proceeds to toss the Molotov cocktail. And you're like, oh man, this is about to do some damage. Remick just knocks that aside. He does not care. It hits the ground. It sets the ground on fire. Does not set the barn on fire, just the ground. And the vampires are let loose and proceeds to tackle, I think, about 3 people who are somehow right next to that door. I don't know why they were so close to that door, but they were right on that door. They get attacked, and then the scene kind of swoops up, and then you see the Avengers, and they just start. At this point, it's the Avengers fighting the Chitauri, and they've done their Avengers Assemble, and they're just all attacking.
Assemble.
Yes.
And then you're going to find out really quickly, though, why we're calling Grace the Human Torch.
And you find out why she's the Human Torch because she beelines it for her husband, who's been kind of being an asshole since turning into a vampire.
A beeline for Bo.
So it makes a beeline for Bo, and I honestly I cannot remember if the two decided to go into the fire or if just circumstance put them into the fire. But they go through the one spot of fire that she happened to create, and are both set ablaze. She stabs him with a stake, which I guess she had right after the Molotov. That was her second item. And instead of stop, dropping, and rolling, she just stays there screaming while she just immolates.
That was nuts. The thing about that scene is it kept cutting back between the action of the rest of the Avengers and her.
And she just kept being more on fire each time.
And I was like, okay, somebody at some point is going to put her out, right? And then you would cut back to the Avengers. Captain America Smoke would be doing something cool. You cut back to Grace. The fire is even bigger on her back. You cut back to Delta Slim. He does something cool. Pulls a piano key, flicks it at somebody. He doesn't do that. Just kidding. But you go back to Grace. She's even more on fire.
There's no exaggeration. She just kept being more on fire until there was no more fire left.
And there was no more body.
No body left. They were dead.
Consume.
And so, just things are happening. Eventually, for some reason, Smoke and Stack kind of just really want to fight each other. I should say Stack really wants to fight Smoke for some reason. I think he's just trying to turn him. But he eventually decides to attack Annie instead, and he gets his teeth into her. Perlene shoots him off with the Winchester. And then Smoke and Annie had earlier spoken after they figured out the vampire thing. Annie wanted to make Smoke promise to her, should she be turned, that she would be killed by Smoke because she didn't want to live that existence. She wanted to be able to move over to the other side because there was somebody waiting for the two of them. Again, we already spoiled that was their child. Yes. You said daughter, I've heard son. I'm going to say child because I am not sure.
I saw daughter in some of the sites when doing a little bit of actually looking into the movie afterwards. That's why. But yeah, I don't know. It could be.
In some of my research, I saw son. So I'm not sure.
Also, sorry, on that note, did you hear them ever provide that child a name? I thought at one point I heard a reference to an Elias.
A name, but that's hard to know because Elias is also Stack's name.
I thought it was Elijah.
No, Elijah is Smoke.
Okay.
So, I may be wrong on that. Comments do not torture me on that one little stupid part that I don't know about, but I'm pretty sure they're Elijah and Elias. Anyway, we find out that there's a child at the end. Smoke kills Annie, which hurts Mary and Stack so much that they have to give up fighting and run back off into the darkness.
You are right about that. Sorry. In the 2025 film Sinner, Smoke's real name is Elijah Moore, and Stack's real name is Elias Moore.
All right. Yep. So they've now fled the fight, which gives the Avengers a little bit of an upper hand, but not enough because pretty soon after that, Remick is kind of like, man, damn, and Delta is like, y'all gotta get out of here. Y'all know the plan. At this point, I'm like, I don't know what the plan is. What's the plan?
I have no idea what the plan is.
The plan was to go upstairs and leave the barn from the top exit, which makes no sense because it just led right back out to where some vampires could be. I guess they didn't know that. Because again, they did not seem to know that there were like 40 extra vampires out there. They thought they knew exactly who they were dealing with.
Yeah.
As they're going upstairs, Delta proceeds to
turn his forearm into salami.
He shatters a beer glass, a beer bottle, and he does this like very just gingerly scrape across his forearm. But that bad boy somehow sloughed off several layers of skin.
You say ginger, he looked to me like he was putting some pressure.
It looked like
like he was like skinning some ginger.
Is
that why they say gingerly?
I thought. I don't know the etymology of gingerly. Because you could be walking gingerly, so I don't think it'd be like they have.
Yeah, but like it's something applicable. If you're looking at, you're peeling that ginger very gingerly, like it's a very careful approach that you have to peeling the skin off and so you walk in light. That's for we'll start an etymology podcast.
We'll come next episode. We'll let you know about that origin. But right now, to me, it looks gingerly. Phoenix says it looks pretty painful. Either way, he sloughed off a good 8 layers of skin, and somehow, in doing so, created holes that just started spouting out blood instead of just a torrential drench of blood. He then walked himself over to the middle of ultimately their goal was to survive until the sun came up because they knew they were dealing with vampires. So he sacrificed himself because the vampires, sensing blood, instead of just sensing the need to turn people, sometimes they're there to turn people, sometimes they're there for blood. In this case, they were there for blood. So a whole bunch of them attacked him and started biting him, and he just kind of was like, you know what, I'm now free from all of the pain that I used to play the blues. I may be back with my brothers and my blues band. And so I guess he's okay with his death. The other 3 at this point, which are Smoke, Pearline, and Sammy, are upstairs. Remick cuts him off. At this point, Stack shows back up, not Mary. And Stack starts fighting Smoke and Remick. Pearline gets bit during this. Sammy wants to help her, but she's like, you just gotta go. Smoke, who's been fighting pretty handily, gets a hold of Sammy and kind of pushes him out. Sammy, who maybe was expecting there to be some steps or a ladder or something, just falls a good 10 feet out to the field. And
right in front of the rest of the caravan of vampires.
There was a bunch of vampires just sitting out there.
Yeah.
None of them really go for him, so he's running out. He runs into this little swamp area that shouldn't, I don't know, just existed. Remick is just there now because Smoke is fighting Stack. Inside, Smoke is fighting Stack, and kind of it looks like he's killed. He's in a position to kill Stack. Meanwhile, Remick is fucking up Sammy outside. Nothing really much Sammy can do because Remick's a vampire. And throughout the night, he's been kind of, especially during the fight, he's gone into actual battle mode and kind of gotten these very sharp claws that he didn't have before, and he's scraped off a good chunk of Sammy's skin. Sammy eventually uses his guitar, which I didn't really see him fall with, but I guess he probably did have on him, and he smashes it into the face of Remick, who is really affected by this because it turns out that guitar had a giant silver plate on it that lodged itself halfway through his face. But it isn't enough to kill him. He's actually just pretty pissed off at this point. when all of a sudden he is stabbed through the chest by Captain America. Captain America got himself down there, and very silently, stealthily, Batman just shoved a stake through the heart of Remick, which at the same time, the sun starts coming up, triple whammy, takes out Remick, who disappears into a soul fire tornado.
And the rest of his followers, at least everyone who was
just chilling out there,
just vicinity.
They're like, oh, the sun, got to get away, but they don't get away in time. So Perlene even out there is out there, and they all just get set ablaze, much like Grace did.
Just wiping them out.
Mm-hmm.
Just wiping them out, which is very unfortunate. A lot of amazing characters that were just in that last few minutes of the movie wiped out. Which sucks, because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in this recording, in this episode, about being so invested in characters that you're just like afraid to see, what that fate is. And to be honest, we had talked about the format of the film, and I think it's rare that you get like a true epilogue to a film within the film. And that's what we get. And not to like skip over what happens next, because the epilogue that I was actually referring to happens after this next scene, because we learned some interesting things. What we learned. So you guys remember Hogwood from the beginning of the story? The old, nice, amazing racist white man who claimed that the Ku Klux Klan no longer operates in the Mississippi Delta in Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1932.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to believe it, I guess.
He says it with a smile that lets you know that clearly that's not the case.
Not, yeah.
But, yeah.
They discover, well, essentially in the sort of revelatory scene where you discover that Remick now sort of sees and shares the thoughts of all of the people that he's turned. Come to find out that the couple that he initially turned were actually members of the KKK, and actually seemingly a faction that is actually operated by Hogwood himself. And the whole plan in selling Smoke and Stack, this sawmill and this plot of land, is that they were actually going to return at dawn the following day to go, as they would call it, inward hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So what you get is this scene after all the vampires have been obliterated, a very emotional scene where you have Smoke pulling some equipment out from the back of the truck, the same equipment that the men at the beginning of the movie were potentially going to rob, and it's filled with some heavy artillery. From there, you get a very touching scene where Smoke essentially tells Sammy to go. And that's where we sort of circle right back to the beginning of the movie, with Sammy taking their convertible, driving back to his father's church. But what's happening with Smoke at this time?
Starting to rain, it sounds like.
Okay, I was about to say, dude, I thought something. I honestly kind of felt like a chupacabra was walking up my steps.
I think if a chupacabra was walking up your steps, you wouldn't hear it.
Oh, they're that quiet.
Yeah,
they walk that gingerly,
super quiet. They walk pretty gingerly. I think you don't hear it until they're like killing like a pig or something.
Okay, well, I'll have to keep that in mind. But so yeah, here we get to the scene that Dame had mentioned earlier, which is the reveal of who it is that's actually waiting for Annie on the other side, and it is their child, the child that they had apparently lost. But we only get this scene actually because, unfortunately, one of our protagonists is on his way out of the door. So essentially, as the members of the KKK arrive at dawn, just as they had expected, just as they had planned, just as Remick actually foretold, Smoke is nowhere to be found, but he's actually hiding in the bushes with a sniper rifle, and he just starts picking them off one by one. And so in preparation for their arrival, he sort of set placed guns all around the land. He picks up a Tommy gun that he dug a little trench for, covered with, like a plate of wood, and he's just mowing, these KKK members down, and it's very cathartic. It's kind of what it feels like, because why they were coming back.
A Black Power fantasy.
Yeah, it's but unfortunately during this whole sequence, Smoke does take a bullet through and through, through his
shank.
Mm-hmm. And though it doesn't maybe appear immediately that this is a mortal or a fatal wound,
I'm just going to make an assumption that it wasn't that gunshot. I'm going to assume the gunshot had something to do with it. I'm going to make the assumption that it was just the events of that night. Obviously, he must have taken a lot of damage having to fight vampires. So I'm going to just
maybe internal. Because other than that, I didn't see any other superficial.
Yeah, I'm just assuming he just took a bunch of beating and he was just I'm done,
tired.
I'm ready to die. It also could be that he wasn't dead yet. I actually was expecting after he held the baby that he would put the baby away, and then maybe it would insinuate that he shot himself. But I guess he really just wants to leave that up to speculation.
It kind of reminds me where it's kind of seemed like he was in this sort of in-between state where he was still alive, but sort of slipping in and out of consciousness, and there was sort of a blend of what was after and what was now, sort of this surreal imagery. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, but it kind of reminds me of Gladiator, when in the very end of Gladiator, Russell Crowe's character Maximus is stabbed, and he's losing a lot of blood, but he just manages still to squeak out towards the end of that fight, and then he collapses on the ground, and there's this sort of really beautiful shot of what looks like him sort of being carried, but floating across the ground back home. That's what it kind of reminds me of this moment where it's he can finally rest. He can finally just move past everything that's been plaguing him, the whole thing that has maybe driven them back to Clarksdale in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So then we get the finish of the beginning of the movie where Sammy has made his way back home. He interrupts service because it is Sunday morning at this point, and his father tells him to give up his sinful past, give up his ways, and put the guitar down. Sammy does not do that. He instead leaves. And we find out during the credits that he did head to Chicago, and he became a famed blues musician. At this point, he is aged considerably. We move up to 60 years to 1982. Where he seemingly was kind of playing in as a guest at a bar, club, whatever. And then we get a mid-credit scene, and this mid-credit scene acts as essentially an epilogue. It'd be as if you were reading a book. This is a true epilogue where it lets you know that two people did survive that night that were not Sammy, and they were Stack and Mary, who show up at the bar after being invited in and have a really kind of heart to heart with Sammy. Stack reveals that Smoke made him promise to not attack Sammy while Sammy was alive, and that was the only way he was going to let Stack leave. And Stack got back with Mary. The two had been essentially, we knew they were former lovers. They even share a lot of sexual tension throughout the beginning, middle part of the movie, and it seems that both get kind of a monkey's paw wish, and that both are finally able to be together. They're both able to be kind of free from the sins of the father, in a sense, the world that they were in, which is a world where a white passing woman such as Mary, despite having some African American blood in her, would not have been able to truly be with an African American. And while Stack lost Smoke, Stack was able to finally be able to live in a world where he didn't constantly always have to watch his back, or he didn't constantly have to be in a world without Mary. And so they both found a bit of happiness, and certainly Sammy's found his happiness. They kind of essentially asked each other, what did that day mean to you? For Sammy, all the way up until sundown, it was the greatest night of his life. And it turns out that Stack feels that same way. But Stack also understands that he gave up a lot for that. He lost his brother. He lost the ability to be out in the sun. He lost the ability to die. But it also means that he is free now. And while he got that freedom and that ability to feel like he was flying then, he feels it now with Mary.
Well, I thought that he said that was, so when he was saying that, I'm sorry, what did he was like, it was the last time I saw my brother, it was the last time I saw the sun. Did he say that it was the last time that he felt free, or the first time that he felt free?
The first time.
The first time that he ever felt free.
And so he did ask Sammy if Sammy wanted him to be, like, Sammy wanted to get turned, because it looked like, according to Stack, Sammy was on his way out. But Sammy says he's lived his life and he doesn't need to continue. Mm-hmm. And it's a fitting end. And it's such a great bookend to this story because it gives it that true ending. Because when it was going to just end with like being like, oh, he grew up to be buddy guy essentially. You're like, oh, I mean that's cool. But knowing that those two survived and knowing that they feel the way that they feel, because it would be easy for them to be just like new antagonists, but in this case they're not antagonists. These three have so much history together at this point that it's like there's a closure there. And I said it when we were in the movie theater, and I'll say it again. I didn't think there was going to be an epilogue, but I didn't even know there needed to be one. I was fulfilled. But then the epilogue just like gave me the final bit of nourishment. I was like, oh, I really needed that. That was so great. There is another scene that is the end credit scene, and it's interesting because it is just Miles playing the guitar and singing a little bit. It's interesting because it itself exists within a flashback in the movie, and it's seemingly it may be just a day that he had prior to this, or it may be like right before it. It's hard to tell when it happens, but it's a scene. It was a thing that happened.
There's the feeling that you had. I thought the same thing in that I felt fulfilled. I got to the epilogue, and again, just like you were saying, when I thought that it was just a scene to show us that he grew up into Buddy. I'm sorry, not so he grew up into the famous player. Sorry, but I think Buddy is the actual name of the musician. I was like, okay, cool. Where's where is this going? Initially, kind of felt that it was just tacked on for the sake of being tacked on, but then you get Stack and Mary coming in, and obviously they're dressed with the times. So I mean, it's the 90s, so you can imagine kind of what that looks like. And when they're having that conversation, the flashback scene when Sammy asks him that question, and he says that it was the first time that he'd ever felt free. And it's juxtaposed against the shot of the two of them in the car. And this will be the scene earlier in the movie where Stack's driving the car and you have Sammy playing the guitar. And Stack is just so taken aback at how wonderful and amazing Sammy sings that even in that moment, you kind of felt that spark between them, I think, as an audience member, of just this excitement. You were excited for all of the prospects before them. Even though you knew that this movie was going to take a turn, you were so excited to see what they were going to build. And there's something I always kind of feel like so sad about with moments like that in movies, when there's that sort of flashback to what was and you wonder what could have been. And there's just this finality to those relationships. It gets me, man. I don't know. It always kind of reminds me of like the last episode of one of your favorite sitcoms, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when he's just standing in that house that you've come to know, you grew up with for 6-7 years, and they turn off the lights, and they're never going to be back in that house again. That's it. And you kind of, these actors did such a great job in bringing this world to life and these characters to life that, again, you want this life for them, you want what's best for them, and to a degree you kind of feel that what's best for them is what's best for you, which is seeing them stay together for as long as possible. but it also says something that they were able to find their own happiness, and for Sammy, he didn't need to live forever to find that, and we see that Stack and Mary obviously gave up a lot in order to have it. But I think it says something about culture in general, our culture in general, where it's you look at. There's plenty of books that I can recommend to you that will highlight this, that wealth is not in the hands of black people in America. Yet, despite that, and despite having this period piece that shows how little they actually had, that people were literally going to a juke joint, playing or trying to pay for drinks with what essentially looked like poker chips, that despite having nothing, they had everything. Right, that whole scene with the music, with all of the cultures, coming together, and not clashing, but meshing together perfectly, and you're seeing the past, present, and future interacting, and you have Remick and the two other white folk that he changed into vampires outside admiring that, wishing for that, and yet, arguably, from a monetary standpoint, Remick can just produce gold coins. Like, he's been alive for centuries. He's probably amassed fortunes that we can't even imagine, and yet he still doesn't have that, though, right? There's still things he just can't get, and again, just despite what little they had each other, and I think that says a lot.
Definitely does. You got any closing thoughts?
Go see this movie as many times as possible. I know we're going to see it a lot. Something I am curious about, because so much of what I've been seeing on Instagram about this movie, by and large, the consensus seems to be it's an amazing film. But when it comes to the box office return, there's all that concern about, oh man, well, Warner Brothers really needs this. And I don't know if that narrative is being pushed just because this is one of those movies that they were banking on and Warner Brothers is in a tight spot, or if in general movies get that treatment where every movie that comes out, they're like, oh, it's been 2 days, you didn't make your budget back yet. Like, what is that? And like, what is the expectation that we can expect for, the drop-off in sales week to week? Because I know it's typically a pretty significant decrease after the opening weekend. And what does it say about the opening weekend that says, well, if we're following the more consistent projections, especially for an R-rated film, this is where we can probably see it landing within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever its runtime is.
It's really interesting because I did see an article that basically was saying that it's very likely that Sinners takes the second weekend as the top.
Yeah, because what's going to go against? Until Dawn? Right? Comes out this week?
Until Dawn or some other movie that I think they were only thinking would get only 25 mil or something like that. And it's like, it doesn't really have anything to... you can order they joyriding? I've been hearing this thing for the past 3 minutes. Goodness gracious, ambulance, just get to wherever the hell you need to get to.
I hope wherever's not ambulance is okay, but no, it is very loud. It is extremely loud. It seems like it's been coming up towards this place for quite some time.
Yeah, it's right here. But anyway, so it doesn't really have anything to go up against it really up until Thunderbolts.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep it in the movie theater, that should be fine. That should be enough.
Yeah.
Now, granted, yes, they do typically have, I would probably say, if it hits 61 mil, it'll probably hit. Honestly, because of how much talk has been around it, I actually expect it to go up as opposed to, the usual hard decline. But I would say probably about week 3, you would probably start to see that real natural decline of half and then half and then half. But there are very few movies that will make their budget that first weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
And especially nowadays, I would have said that if this movie had come out during Avengers Endgame time, yeah, like, oh, this movie had probably done gangbusters. People wanted to be in movie theaters during that time because they were really enjoying the movies that were coming out. And we weren't in a situation where like things were hitting streaming so fast that you could just sit there and wait. But I gotta put that on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers made some bad decisions. And that's on them. That's not on Ryan Coogler and Sinners. Ryan Coogler and Sinners shouldn't have to sit there and be your like savior because you made poor decisions.
Where do you think they made poor decisions though?
If we did that, that'd be a whole nother.
That would be. I was just curious if like there's any other movies that you would.
Like, I know. Put it on Mickey 17 either. I would put that on their actual like business decisions. Warner Brothers over the past like 40 years has been doing like, whether it be the AOL Time Warner merger, whether it be like this new Discover merger, like they constantly have been making poor decisions. Every time they make a good one, they make a whole bunch of bad ones. And it isn't necessarily their choice in movies as much as it is their actual choice in business, like acumen. But I mean that's on them. They got two movies. They got Sinners and Superman, who more than likely will, I guess, keep them away from the mouse. But yeah, so I also enjoyed the movie a lot. Big time fan of it. I really do hope that you guys actually go out and watch it. If you haven't watched it, I'm actually kind of mad at you that you sat here and listened to us for 2+ hours because you should have been watching this movie instead.
And then came back
and listen to us for 2+ hours.
And then go see the movie again and then come back and listen to us again.
Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, talk about it in the comments because, guys, we are, for you,
yes,
this is episode 5, but for us, this is our first episode post launching on YouTube that is up to date. So we are on YouTube now. We're on Spotify now. Both at Panharmonicon Studios. Please like, share, subscribe. Just like you can thumbs down if you didn't enjoy this. I praise you for listening to this whole thing and then being like, it wasn't for me.
Absolutely.
But
Thank you for it.
Put it in the comments why. We are looking for feedback. We're looking for some criticism, and we are looking for suggestions. If you got a movie you want us to watch, if you're like, man, I really hope those dudes look at Manos: Hand of Fate. If you're really like, oh man, I sure hope they do the Maltese Falcon. Whatever you want us to watch, provided that it's watchable.
Yes.
We will watch it. We will. Oh my goodness, sorry. We will talk about it. And we also got some stuff coming up for you guys. Do find us on our socials. We're on Instagram at Panharmonicon Studios. We're at Blue Sky, Panharmonicon Studios. We're on Twitter, Panharmonicon Studios.
Is it X now? Is that the?
I'm not calling it X. It's Twitter. I'm not calling it crap X. Twitter. It's Panharmonicon Studios. This has been Damon.
And this is Farron.
And thank you for listening to another episode of Panharmonicon Studios Presents, a podcast.
Ooh.
Thank you guys for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Panharmonicon presents a podcast.